Hey, 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 everybody. Hey, hey, hey. One. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show here on AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. It's a joy to be with you today as we are in this holy season. So many holy days converge at this moment, and I think it's a time of reflection for us all. And I hope that we will come together and do just that and establish this beloved community that is within our grasp, but it continues to elude us. Let's come together, everybody. Please join us on the Santita Jackson Show, Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel. We are there, and the am950radio.com family, and of course, the Santita Jackson and Friends Facebook page. Hey, Mike. And I am on Blue Sky, everybody. Who knew? At Santita Jackson at BSKY dot social. Okay. And X. Oh, my goodness. At Santita J. So now that I've gotten those things out the way, let's talk about a couple of things that I think are going to be very, very interesting. Over the past week, we saw something that is really, quite frankly, has been heartbreaking, particularly when you value human life. And I think everybody here does value human life. Um, Brian Thompson, 50 years old, a husband, father of two, the CEO of one of the biggest healthcare organizations on earth, was killed in cold blood in the middle of Midtown Manhattan. I've been a New Yorker for years and years and years, and I cannot begin to describe to you how incredibly jarring that scene is because it is in the middle of everything. That Hilton is a block away from Radio City Music Hall, which is a block away from Rockefeller Center. It's literally across the street. It's all part of the same complex. So the Christmas tree is there. MSNBC, NBC are there. 2 blocks away, my place, Fox News. It's right there. It's all right there. And up and down the street, the streets are teeming. You go a block over and you get over to Fifth Avenue, it's Saks Fifth Avenue, and all of the lights are up and down the streets. And you go over to Broadway a few blocks. I mean, it's in the middle of the city. And this man was shot during a change in shift, but of the NYPD, but still people were out. People were going to work. And this man calmly shot him with a silencer. And I'm going to let John Canham Klein from FAIR, their healthcare expert, really give us the details. And Dr. Himmelstein, who's going to be with us for a short time before he has to leave today, I'm going to let them give us the details. But something very interesting was seen on the bullets. Phrases that those of us who've had to have entanglements with the insurance companies, and everybody I know has had an entanglement, or they've just been fortunate enough to be able to cut a check. But most people can't cut checks. Many Americans go bankrupt just trying to keep up. Even if you have blue chip insurance, so-called blue chip insurance, the co-pays, the ghost bills will blow your mind. You leave the office, you think you've paid the bill, and then a month or so later, hundreds of thousands of dollars you've been billed. It's like, wait a minute, I've paid into this system in good faith. What is my return? So there's been this torrent I was corrected this morning by someone near and dear to you, Dr. Himmelstein, Dr. Steffi Woolhandler. She said it's not a torrent of hate, it's a torrent of anger. That's really what it is. You've seen Americans not celebrating Brian Thompson's death. I've not seen that. I've seen people say, well, pending prior approval or pre-approval, I'm going to withhold my grief, my tears. I mean, they've had a lot to say. It's been jarring. But they've said, look, let me explain to you why I feel this way. Do you know what I've been through with my insurance company? So let's get right to it, because Dr. Himmelstein, noted physician, who's been one of the longtime advocates. He and I'm always bumping into people my father's worked with down through the years. I guess that's what happens when you're a progressive, huh? Someone who has worked with him down through the years. You and Dr. Steffi Woolhandler have been longtime advocates of the single payer system. And of course, John Canham Klein, a longtime union organizer. You've worked with Reverend Jackson down through the years. You've been giving me so many stories, and I'm so grateful for them. But of course, today, I've gotten a lot of your writings from Fairness and Accuracy in Reporting from yet more of our friends, Jim Narakis and Janine Jackson and Norman Solomon and Jeff Cohen. Oh, I mean, the list is endless. Um, but he's their healthcare expert. So let's start with you, Dr. Himmelstein. Um, the New York Times called it a torrent of hate. But when you read, and the corporate media have really characterized these, I think, mischaracterized these Americans as people who've been engaging in Schadenfreude, glorying in this man's death and someone's misfortune. That's not what I see. They take you through chapter and verse these horrifying experiences that they have had with illness and with trying to get their insurance companies to pay the bill. Dr. Himmelstein.
Well, I think you're exactly right, Santita, that there's tremendous anger at the insurance industry in this country because people find that they've been sold a fraudulent product. They've been sold a defective product. They've been told, pay us lots of money and we'll protect you. And then they find that when they need it, there is no protection, that actually, despite paying the premiums and doing what they're supposed to do, they actually don't have the coverage they need to afford the medical care they need. So in effect, we've been running a scam from our insurance companies for decades now. And people are angry at that after decades of mistreatment. I mean, we've done studies over nearly 40 years now showing the misdeeds of the insurance industry. And, there are things like 60% of all bankruptcies in this country are at least in part because of illness and medical bills. And, if you ask people in other countries how many people go bankrupt, they don't know what you're talking about. The Minister of Health of Japan, a reporter for the Washington Post asked years ago how many people go bankrupt in this country from medical care. And the Minister of Health said, what are you talking about? I never heard of that. And we have millions of people literally each year in this country having their credit ruined, going into financial ruin, and not getting the care they need because the coverage they were promised evaporates when they need it most. In effect, our health insurance system is almost like a hospital gown. You think you're covered, and it turns out that you're actually not.
Sorry, but that is, oh, John, I'm glad, but it's kind of true. You're flapping in the wind. I mean, and really, and it is so unsettling. Dr. Himmelstein and John Canham Klein. It is so unsettling to get these, to find out that you don't have the cover, to have to go to lawyer up, so to speak. I mean, you have to make a case. I'm like, I broke my leg here. What are you talking about? They said I've got congestive heart failure. What do you mean I have to wait? I have to wait? Wait to do what? To die? And it's frightening. And then people are, and you know this as a physician, Dr. Himmelstein, people are sick and they don't feel well. They're being denied the top shelf, top drawer medicines because the medicine that might not be as effective, but it's the same thing. That's what they will tell you. Well, if you take this one, you're going to be okay. It's like, no, the doctor said that I need this best. And it's like the doctor's on a collision course with these health insurance companies as well, Dr. Himmelstein. I mean, as a doctor, is it frustrating for you?
Oh, absolutely. They drive doctors crazy because we make recommendations about care to our patients, and then the insurance company says, no, you can't. I mean, practicing medicine has become like a game of Mother May I at this point. Every time you turn around, the instruction is, well, call up and spend hours on the phone trying to get the insurance company to allow you to do what you know should be done for this patient. And doctors today are just fed up with the insurance companies, as patients are as well. We can't practice medicine without the second guessing constantly of insurance plans. And I mean, we used to say, well, there are some people who have government insurance and maybe that's going to be a problem. Government might interfere, but people have what they think is top drawer at private insurance. Those are the people who are getting the no's from their insurance company. It's not the people on Medicare, which is government insurance, but Medicare doesn't say no the way the private insurance plans now routinely do. So it's sort of this weird world in which people who have what we think of as the best coverage are the ones who are often most abused by their insurance.
So, what to you? I mean, because it seems to me the corporate media are they're very resistant. Well, they're shaping a narrative. They want us to dislike the people, most Americans, who are on social media sounding off about the poor treatment that they receive at the hands of these private insurers. I mean, they're very angry and they're hurt. They feel betrayed. And they're being characterized as people who are cheering on the death of a human being. And that is not what I've seen. What do you think we have reached an inflection point? Because it's very clear that the corporate media did have not expected to see Americans react this way and in such I mean, it's been explosive, quite frankly.
Well, I hope we have, and we sorely need a change in our healthcare system. We have by far the most expensive healthcare in the world. People are paying huge amounts. I mean, for every dollar that we spend in this country, about 20 cents of it goes for healthcare. And yet Americans live far shorter than people in other comparable countries. And life expectancy, even before the pandemic, life expectancy was actually falling for most Americans, and not for the richest Americans, but for everybody below the top. So we need to be at an inflection point because we sorely need change in our healthcare system, where we have the resources to do really top flight care, give top flight care to every American, but we're squandering those resources. We're throwing away, at this point, about $900 billion each year. That's billion with a B, $900 billion each year on useless bureaucracy, which is the cost of extracting profits for not just the health insurance companies, but many of the other hangers on in our healthcare system, and frankly, enforcing inequality. So if we took that 900 billion and actually spent it on care rather than bureaucracy, we could give terrific care to every American.
When you say bureaucracy, are those the administrative costs? I mean, are you looking at what you propose would single payer end the insurance industry, the health insurance industry as we know it?
It would say, and the private insurance industry. Yeah, it would say, we don't need the million people doing useless work in insurance companies. I mean, look, United Healthcare employs 180,000 people in its insurance division. That's many more than we need to run the entire healthcare system from an administrative point of view. So we have people being paid, most of them not highly paid. We need to find comparable good jobs for people helping to deliver healthcare who are now doing useless mind-numbing work for insurance companies. But it's also on the hospitals and the doctor's office, because we have our armies of people who are fighting with the insurance companies to try and get paid. So we have just vast numbers of people who are wasting their lives doing, basically pushing papers in the healthcare system. And we ought to give them decent jobs doing work that we need to do. And that's wasting huge amounts of money. As I say, most of those are good people in low paid jobs, but also there are some extraordinarily high incomes and big profits being made, and we ought to go get those out of the healthcare system as well.
Wow, indeed. And the denial, John Canham Klein. It's so hard to find out what the denial rates are. You have to dig and dig. I mean, you always have to become a super sleuth. And it turns out United Healthcare, after I just hunt and pecked and listened to every show that I could, they have twice the denial rate of any other. I mean, they have twice the average. Twice the average. I mean, unbelievable. What do you make of this? Oh, you're on mute. Okay, it's okay. Okay, you're still on mute. I don't know what happened. Okay. Well, we'll fix it. You know what? Go out and come back in. Okay. But, I mean, so what do you think? What is the answer now? I mean, where do you think we're going to go from here? Because the corporate media, they are shaping this narrative. And I think that's what's very concerning to me. Because given what's happened to this gentleman, I mean, on the same day, Anthem Blue Cross Blue Shield was going to, limit anesthesia? Can you explain that to me?
Yeah, they were saying, if the average surgery for this kind of problem only takes 2 hours, if you're in surgery more than 2 hours, we're not going to pay the anesthesiologist for that extra time. So, if there's a complication that comes up, then the surgery has to go longer. They were saying we're not paying for that extra time. Now, the anesthesiologist, one would hope, isn't going to walk away after 2 hours. But the insurance company was saying to them, well, we're not going to pay you for anything over that 2 hours. Happily, there was a big enough outcry over that the insurance company was forced to pull back on it. I mean, but we've seen, through the years, the insurance companies doing one bad deed after another. And some of the worst stuff, when it comes out, they say, well, we'll stop that one. And then they come up with a new trick. So back, 20 years ago, I guess, I had in my contract with one of the big HMOs, which became Aetna, so today it's Aetna, a clause that basically said I'm not allowed to tell my patients how I'm paid, or that the HMO would pay me more for denying care to my patients. I'd get a bonus if I denied care. So there was a gag clause, and so then the insurance company said, "Oh, we're not going to have those gag clauses anymore." But they went on with their other bad behaviors. I think, John, you're back. You may have some comments on this. John Canham Klein and I wrote a book together 25 years ago about these things. Maybe it was longer. But,
and now, okay, John, we still can't hear you. I can't believe it. I don't know what happened. Oh, wow. And we were talking just before airtime, but that's okay. Not now. Okay. All right. But we're going to keep on going. Your book. What? Not yet.
we wrote a book together.
Okay.
John did most of the writing. I have to admit, he's a better writer than me. And we wrote a book about why single payer national health insurance was really the only fix to the healthcare system. And it's the fix that your father, the Reverend Jackson, proposed when he ran for president. I had the privilege of helping to draft his health platform at that time.
Absolutely.
So,
is it working now?
Oh, absolutely. You're here. Here. We were going to
That's wonderful.
Yeah. Well, I mean, look, I just need to go on and bring my father in here. How about that part? But it has been the progressive position. And of course, when you all were discussing single payer at that time, I didn't really know what that was. I mean, I was under my parents' care. So getting ill, and it's not that I took things for granted, but that was something I didn't have to worry about, quite frankly. It was as I got older. And I remember when I moved to New York and I was singing for Roberta Flack, and my union coverage had not kicked in yet. And my grandmother had a fit. She called my father crying. If she gets sick, what are we going to do? Oh my gosh. And I was like, I'll be fine. Don't worry. It's just going to take a couple of months. Like once I get, a couple more commercials, blah, blah, blah. And she said, you should be in medical school. What are you doing? That was the real thing. That's what it was. But looking back, I can see a car accident. Anything could happen. Anything. And when I've traveled overseas and if I've gotten ill, the doctors come to you, they take care of you. I was going to pull out my checkbook or my charge card to pay them. They looked at me like I was crazy. They said, "No, I'm a doctor. This is what I'm supposed to do. You'll be fine. Take this medicine." And they brought the medicine with them. It was mind blowing. It just, so help me, John. I mean, you please.
Well, Santita, I mean, so many people that I know have had those experiences. There's even, the failures of our healthcare system even show up in the sports section, right? I mean, we had Olympic athletes ecstatic about being able to go get free healthcare in France, right?
Yeah.
I think David has made a couple of really good points that I wanted to pick up on. First, I should just say at the start, right? Murder is a horrific crime.
Yeah.
My own family, a family member of mine was brutally murdered several years ago, and that pain and that anguish never really goes away. And so my heart goes out to, to Brian Thompson's loved ones, and I hope that they catch the perpetrator. And of course, murder, assassination, whatever you want to call it, is not really a path to social justice. But all of that said, for reporters and pundits to express surprise about some of the reactions that they've seen just strongly suggests that people are really out of touch with what's happening in America, because most normal people have experienced some form of the denials, the extraction of wealth and profit that have plagued our healthcare system since even before Dr. Himmelstein and I wrote a book together so many years ago. And one of the things I wanted to say, if we're talking about the media in particular, and we'll get into the question of the denials, is that, the research is there and the stories are there, and they've been there for 30 years. Here in New Haven, I've been privileged to be part of a couple of community fights over medical debt and over surprise billing and some of the other things that are presented in the media as these, anomalous problems. We passed some of the very first medical debt controls 25 years ago here in Connecticut. I was very proud to be part of that fight. We're still loaded up with medical debt in Connecticut, right? One of the problems that we face in the media environment is that whenever something bad happens, it's presented as something bad, not as evidence of what we've been telling you for 30 years, that this system is not even close to working. It's extracting wealth from people and their health, and it's destroying lives. And it's destroying professions of the people who actually take care of us, who spend their lives becoming trained. David described some of the nightmares that physicians go through just trying to actually have their medical opinions, advice, and expertise respected by the people who pay for healthcare. And it's a complete disaster. And I think we should say also, I hope this doesn't get kicked off anywhere. Look, I don't think it's a question of schadenfreude, but we should also not allow the horrific circumstances of this murder to obscure what it is that senior insurance executives actually do. There's a business model, and the business model is this. One, as David said, promise employees, promise individuals, promise governments that if you give them your money, they will take care of you. Two, then they price their products in such a way, in part because they're either unwilling or unable, I think it's more unwilling, but we'll see, to actually control costs. So they price their products in a way that we all get loaded up with these horrible deductibles and copays, as you were talking about, Santita, right? So as a result, last week, the Commonwealth Fund came out with its every 2-year survey. 48% of all American adults skipped needed medical treatment in the last year. That's a half of all of us. And that includes 36% of people that the Commonwealth Fund says, as David says, are well insured, right? no one is using this system effectively except for the people who run it, right? But the pricing of the products is only one way that they maximize profits, right? So, when people do try to get their health care, they face all of these enormous bureaucratic hurdles. Right now, there's a lot of focus on prior authorization. That's just one tool, right? You may not need to get pre-approval to go see your doctor, but then if you submit the bill and turns out the doctor has left your network, they're not going to pay that either. Or after the fact, they'll say, actually, you know what, this wasn't medically necessary.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have a fight. And they expect that they'll lose a lot of the fights individually, but a lot of people won't fight, right? So just a couple of statistics, right? You mentioned the denial rate. Overall, a study, I haven't checked the numbers on this, but a study by a Lending Tree subsidiary found that 32% of people in the individual market get an initial denial of their claim in some form or another, right? When you dig down, I took a look at, they don't publish systematic data on this stuff. They only publish stuff when a state tells them they have to. So if you go to United's website, there's 6 states worth of data, all of it, of course, reported in different forms and, very hard to aggregate unless you're like a math person. But between 9 and 22% of people who apply for prior authorization, that is, your insurance plan says, okay, this kind of healthcare is expensive, so we have to approve it before you get it. Between 9 and 22% of them, of those applications for prior authorization are just denied. I just went through this a few months ago. I had knee surgery denied. My surgeon was used to be the official sideline doctor for the U.S. Open tennis tournament, right? He said I needed knee surgery, and somebody at my insurance company said, no, you don't get it. So I had to appeal that. I won, but there's all of these hurdles that go through. And what you find out in the data, the Kaiser Family Foundation Health Service did an analysis of Medicare Advantage claims, and they found out that when you actually appeal, 80% of the time or so you win. But think about what an appeal means. It means an individual person suffering, right, has to go up against a multi-billion-dollar corporation. So what happens is very few people actually appeal anyway. And so even though they lose occasionally, they're winning big time. And so the business model is pretty straightforward, right? Promise care, get money. Price your product so people won't get care. When they try to get care, deny them care. Keep the money. And there are words we have for people who operate that way. They're not pretty. Like I like kind of old language, so I use brigand. Other people would say mobster, right? This is not a business model that's business. It's wealth extraction, start to finish. And
well,
the
why do you
critical
call
thing
it
is
mobster? I mean, why mobster?
because it is essentially, it's a racket. It's based on promises, and there is real violence underneath it, right? Just because someone sends you a letter saying they're not going to pay for your doctor to take care of you, you're not getting shot with a gun. But the odds are that you or a significant percentage of people in your similar situation are going to get sick or die. Like the Commonwealth Fund survey said that of that half of us adults who skipped healthcare, 40% of them said their medical condition got worse when they skipped it, right? So these decisions that they make have direct impacts on people's lives, on their families, certainly on their pocketbooks. I mean, David mentioned that, the amount of medical debt that people incur is just incredible. So from my perspective, it's like, okay, we have to take a look at how the system actually works. And my challenges with the corporate media are the following. There are a lot of people out there who are doing really good work, actually. They take apart hospital companies, they'll take apart the insurance industry. But it's always presented and framed as a bad thing, a peculiar bad thing, when it's not. Because David and Steffi and other researchers have been showing over and over and over and over again that this is actually normal, right? Massive administrative expense is normal. Problems with claims denials, like there have been studies about that for 30 years. Medical debt, You know, uh, Lucette Lanyadoo was a reporter for the Wall Street Journal. In the early aughts, she was a Pulitzer finalist for writing a beautiful series about medical debt. Okay, a bunch of reporters 2-3 years ago won prizes for writing literally the exact same story, right? And the problem here is that it's all framed as if only we can just get a particular nail to hammer in a particular hole, the problem of medical debt will get fixed. And if we get another nail and you nail it in another hole, maybe you'll fix surprise bills. You get another nail, you nail it into another hole, and maybe we'll fix prior authorization, right? And in the end, right, and that's not just a media problem, it's a political problem, right? And honestly, let's be honest about it, it's a whole lot easier for politicians to say, okay, we're going to pass these regulations, instead of saying, okay, you know what, guys, you're not actually doing the job we gave you. Like, we gave you a job, pay for healthcare, manage the cost. You're not doing that. What you're doing is you're paying yourself $30 million over 3 years. That's what Thompson was paid. And then the reason I use the word mobster is this. The insurance industry rubs their victims' noses in it because they also take a big chunk of that money and they give it to politicians to make sure that none of us will ever have the protection that they promised us but didn't deliver to us, right? That's why I use the phrase mobster. It's that added thing. So you could say we're in a broken system. Somebody's an executive in an insurance company and they understand that it's a broken system, but they got to do the job that they're doing. That's one thing. But to take millions and millions of dollars that we give them, run it through the political system, and use their power to stop us from fixing the system, that for me, that's a line that's obscene. And I think the media does not do a good job connecting these things. I wrote a piece for FAIR a little while back called "Skip the Last Two Paragraphs" and other ways to minimize the amount of time you spend reading healthcare coverage. Because if you go through and you read a story about some horror story, almost invariably it's an old story. It's been going on for years, and David or someone like him has published something showing that it was happening 20 years ago, it's happening now, right? And then I also said, skip the last two paragraphs, because you'll go from these horrific stories. The Times did a great piece on one of the big, on staff cuts in one of the big Catholic hospital systems, right? You get to the end, and it's like, okay, politicians say that they might have some kind of means-tested thing for some people to get less medical debt. And that is not a solution. That's perpetuating a system that we all know is broken. And so from my perspective, this is a moment where I hope, as David said, we are at an inflection point. I hope that this will be a wake-up call for people who write about healthcare for corporate media, for the political class in this country, to look at the responses that people are having and not say to themselves, gosh, look at those horrible people, but to say, oh my gosh, the anger here is so much worse than I thought. So much worse than I thought. And we actually have to start figuring out how to really do something about it.
Well, and that gets me to that point. I mean, it is so much worse than people thought. And watching Dr. Himmelstein and John Cannon Klein, watching the pundits who are just as disconnected from people as they can be, watching the anchors, they are just as disconnected from people as they can be. They are genuinely shocked. And I said, what planet have you been living on? People are being denied right and left and right. You see people who are struggling physically. They don't feel well. I mean, Americans, my brother, a former Congressman Jesse Jackson Jr. said, Americans are the best dressed poor people in the world. And we're also the sickest rich people in the world. I mean, just the health outcomes, they're getting worse. Our life expectancies, they're dropping. Does anyone not get it? I mean, why are we looking? I mean, these people are not the problem. They're telling you their problems. They're telling you the problem. And what I'm here today to talk about are some, I want to expose that because I just seen occasionally a response that was not sympathetic, but I'm hearing that spoken on television. I'm not hearing that on social media. Social media, everybody's got some horror story. I mean, and they are horrible. I mean, there's some things you can't take an aspirin or an Aleve for. Some people, you need surgery, you need treatment, and people are not able to get it. And then people are watching their loved ones die or be very, very sick. And hey, I know I've got a father with Parkinson's. Everybody in my family's got Parkinson's now because any kind of information we can get on it, we're trying to find it. When my brother was diagnosed as bipolar, everybody became an expert because you want to understand it. These are people you love, and whatever I can do, if I find out something else that can help you, I'm going to do it. When I had life-saving surgery 20 years ago, it was weight loss surgery. They knew I needed it. I needed to lose 200 pounds, but they didn't want me to have this surgery, even though we found the best surgery for Black people, and it's so expensive, we don't have access to it. And these surgeons don't take it. You cut them a check. They said, if you get it reimbursed by your insurance company, good for you, but we don't even fool with them. What are you supposed to do? But my family, they were scared to death. They were scared they were going to lose me. So they said, no. Father said, I'm not going to bury any kids. So whatever I've got to figure out, I will help you to figure this out. You just go do it. I was blessed. But my goodness, Americans are really struggling out here. No one is hearing them. I mean, what can we do? Where do we go from here? I mean, and now everybody's afraid to touch it. Many doctors don't want to. I mean, a lot of people don't want to touch this now because they don't want to be seen as sympathizing with someone who murdered someone. But you've got the internet sleuths. I was reading in the Daily Mail, Dr. Himmelstein and John Cannon Klein. The internet sleuths are saying, I'm not going to help them find this guy. Because you know what? I don't sign on to murder. But you know what? He's getting everybody's attention. I'm not going to help you to find him. They've been saying it openly online. I mean,
yeah, I should say, like, we don't even know really what this person's motivation was.
Okay.
Right? I mean, it could have been something else. And so, yeah, I mean, you should not view this person as like some revolutionary hero. Yeah, but the critical thing is, like, not expecting people to say, I'm going to withhold my sympathy until I get prior authorization. Like, not expecting that to happen is a sign that, as you said, Santita, of people being completely out of touch. And I'll just add something that, I think David, in his very disciplined way, hit on a really good point, which is, David, you said that we have the resources. Not a day goes by where I do my work and I don't stop for a moment and go, oh my God, there's so much damn money in this system. Mm-hmm. It's just the amount of money that flows through the system, not to healthcare, not to people like David who take care of them, not to you and me, Santita, for our needs, is staggering. Twice as much on average as other industrialized societies. And we get less healthcare for it. We go to the doctor less often, and we go to the hospital less often. And yet we'll also have, media and politicians who spend a lot of time thinking, oh my goodness, we've got to charge people more because they need skin in the game in order to control costs. That's not what's causing our cost spiral at all. It's a system designed around looting, a design to harass doctors and try to force them to not do what they're trained to do, and a system designed to bankrupt all of us so that the corporations can actually make a whole lot of money. And it's really stunning to me to see some folks in the media, including some folks who cover this industry, show a level of surprise about the anger that's out there, because it's everywhere. I don't talk to anyone who has not had some issue with this system getting in the way of them getting health care and getting in between them and their doctors.
I mean, over a broken leg.
Yeah.
I mean, something routine, Dr. Himmelstein, John, just something routine. And if you don't get these little things attended to, relatively minor, right? They can become big things. Now, I'm just saying this as a layperson, Dr. Himmelstein. But, there are many women, there's a doctor here, Dr. Olapade. She's Nigerian American, and she's been doing research that is very helpful to Black women, women of African ancestry, no matter how minuscule, because when you find out the kind of breast cancer you have, if you are of a certain extraction of African, the medicines won't treat you. So she's been doing the research to develop the medicines that will help Black women. Several friends of mine have had breast cancer and they've been able to go to her, but I mean, she's working to try and get to deliver this to people who don't have money. But all my friends who were able to do that, they were able to cut checks. They didn't have to, should I say, they didn't have to wait.
Yeah.
They were diagnosed. They went and they said, you know what? I'm finding this out. And Santita, I'm going to be in Chicago. That's it. Because, Dr. Himmelstein, what are we supposed to do? I mean, to me, this is unsustainable.
We need to actually organize for change in this country. I mean, we at this point, have had a sad lesson for what happens when the Democrats don't actually lead us to the change we need. Mm-hmm. And we've ended up with a much worse option. But we need the political leaders to be led by the people in this country to actually take the action that we need. I mean, you look at Canada, which has a national health insurance system, which came because of, the efforts of a progressive party in one province in Canada in the 1940s and 50s. And Tommy Douglas, who was the leader of that party, was voted in a Canadian Broadcasting System poll of its viewers as the greatest Canadian of all time for leading the move to national health insurance. If we had more political leaders like your father once was, who would say, well, we actually are going to do what needs to be done for the American people, even if it's going to endanger our contributions from the big spenders like the insurance industries and the drug industries. We were just looking at one drug that one of my family members is thinking of taking, that's $2,500 a dose in the United States, is $240 a dose in Britain. So, the anger is really, John, I think is right in calling them mobsters. It's the most organized crime in our country. There's no other criminal enterprise that extracts the same kind of money that our health industry and health insurance industry extracts. And also, frankly, there's no other that kills as many people. So we need a very large political movement that can overcome the huge power and financial clout of the insurance industry, the drug industry, and an increasing part of the hospital industry and the people who own doctors' practices. I mean, at this point, United Healthcare owns 10% of all the doctors in the United States.
What do you mean they own them?
They've bought the practices.
How do you buy someone's practice?
You go up to their practice or the group practice and you say, I'll give you $1 million for each of your practices or however much the deal is for, and we now own you and you're now our employee. United Healthcare owns 90,000 doctors. So it's not just an insurance company, it's also extracting huge amounts from doctors who they pay to, frankly, cheat Medicare. So they're one of the biggest cheaters of the Medicare program. The big insurance companies overcharged Medicare by $82 billion this year alone. That's not my figure. That's the Congressional Advisory Committee on Medicare. Says $82 billion in overcharges by the insurance companies that run private Medicare plans. And part of the way they do that overcharging is they get their doctors, the 90,000 doctors who United Healthcare owns, to put in diagnoses that make the government pay them more, even if those diagnoses are either completely fake in many cases or make no difference. But here we'll put this diagnosis on even if it doesn't help the patient. So there's a whole really thick book of tricks of how the various pieces of the healthcare industry are at this point organized crime.
I would just add on that, Santita. That's a great point, David. I think it's also another thing that we need to do is we shouldn't settle for less with our political friends. Because the reality here is, and I've written several articles about why I think the whole media coverage of private equity in healthcare is completely overblown. And the reason I wrote those articles was because we're going to spend 3 or 4, 5 years trying to figure out, can we kick private equity out of healthcare? And when we do, if we do, it isn't going to really make any difference because that's one way to organize capital. The problem is private control of our healthcare system. Whether you've got shareholders, whether it's private equity, whatever, that's the problem. And until we start to treat healthcare as a public good, as something that belongs to all of us, it's going to be very difficult to make a lot of inroads on this. And in particular, I think, it's one thing to say, let's try to pass regulations to tell an insurance company that it has to use a better form of AI when it denies claims. And it's another to say, why don't we get rid of Medicare premiums and make Medicare affordable for everybody, right? So like pushing our political friends to move in the right direction, I think is critically important. They should support Medicare for all single payer. And also to the extent that anybody wants to talk about something short of that, it has to be something that credibly moves us in the right direction and doesn't waste time. Because David's point, I think for me, when I look at the whole industry, the point that David made that is most important for everybody to understand is they have a huge bag of tricks. So anytime you read about them pulling one of the tricks, if all you try to do is to stop that one trick, they're going to pull out the other dozen tricks and they're just going to keep stealing money and they're going to keep harming us. And I think that's the actual thing about it. And I write about this frequently. My wife is going to kill me if I don't tell your viewers that I do write, other than for FAIR, I write at Substack, Healing and Stealing at Substack.com is my newsletter, so folks can get a lot of this stuff there. But I just think that right here is one of those rare conversations where we're asking all the right questions here. And I think the hardest one to answer is the one that you posed to David and I just now, which is, what do we do next? Because it does seem like a huge jump from here to there. And David's point that in the end, it's going to come down to organizing, and people's commitment to organizing, I think, is absolutely the right answer.
Well, we've got to do something, because all of these programs, Dr. Himmelstein, and to your point, John Klein, and please say whatever you're going to say, Dr. Himmelstein, they're privatizing everything that really, to me, they're undoing the social contract, because they are violating the common good. It's about to not exist. Social security. So, I mean, it gives you security. I mean, they want to privatize that. Not only is the Postal Service a big part of our middle class, I mean, Amazon uses them, for heaven's sake. I mean, they've done great work. They've been unplugged so they can be privatized. We're privatizing everything. And it's going to unplug all of us. Dr. Himmelstein, you were saying, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, I was going to agree on that and say, many years ago, the guru of libertarian economics, Milton Friedman, once said, few trends could so thoroughly undermine capitalist society other than if corporate officials took on a social responsibility other than to make as much money for their shareholders as possible. So they're not doing something that they shouldn't be doing. That's the problem. When we expect United Healthcare or other big insurance companies or the drug companies to act right. We're expecting a scorpion not to sting. I mean,
Oh, wow.
they're in they're in business to make money. They're not in business to do good. And that's our problem. I'm going to have to sign off now shortly.
But
Santita.
your final word before you go. And I thank you for staying this long, really.
Well, we have a fight on our hands and an increasing fight every year. And we need to change not just the United Healthcare, but our healthcare system to really make it a system that patients own. So it shouldn't be a system that corporations own your healthcare. The American people should own their healthcare. They're already paying for it. 69% of all of the money spent on healthcare comes from the taxpayers. So we're paying for national health insurance. We're paying for healthcare for all of our people, but Americans aren't getting it. And we need to reclaim that resource that we're paying for. So,
Dr. David Himmelstein, long time advocate, really frontline advocate for single payer and really to our health as the toast goes. Thank you so much. And our love to Dr. Steffi Woolhandler.
Thanks so much for having me.
Oh, of course. Thank you. Thank you for all of your work. John Canham Klein, of course, Healing and Stealing. You know, I love that. I love it. I mean, I have a couple minutes here. I want to give you the runway to say whatever you need to say, because I feel like something has happened. It's just something in the zeitgeist where it just seems that people are moving. People are moving. People really, even with the vote for Trump, the other side of that is that the most popular elected official in the United States is still Bernie Sanders. You know, and when he was running, people were like, "Well, I don't, I'll take either of them because they both look like, I mean, they're going to go to Washington and they're going to do something." And I think if you want to do something, you're going to also have to do a forensics on the patterns and practices of these companies. And quite frankly, I think that they violated us so they don't need to be in business. I mean,
I think there's Santita, I think David's last comment, I shouldn't pick up on it because we should just leave it there because it was so good. But the thing to really understand is, they are scorpions and they're going to sting. And our political leadership for a half a century and bipartisan political leadership has put them in charge of our healthcare. Right? I mean, take Medicare Advantage. There's a lot of negative publicity about it. People are very frustrated with the privatization of Medicare. And by the way, for people who want to know what privatized Social Security is going to look like, look at Medicare Advantage, right? Well, that started all the way back in a bipartisan agreement between Richard Nixon and Ted Kennedy, right? And when the Clinton administration tried to reform healthcare, what we ended up is an expansion of Medicare managed care. Same with the Affordable Care Act, right? Same with both Bushes, right? The consistent thing here is that there's a belief that the only way that Americans ought to get healthcare is through private insurance. Mm-hmm. That's what we have to break. And that is very hard, right? It's much easier, as I said, to hold an outraged hearing and to say we're going to do a little bit of a thing about medical debt. Now, if you can figure out some way to relieve people's medical debt, do it. It's a horrible situation, right? But the reality here is there is bipartisan agreement that healthcare fundamentally should be driven through private industry. And that is something that nobody else in the world does because it doesn't work. Because if you put scorpions in charge, they're going to scorpion, right? Mm-hmm. And this is a very difficult thing. And look, I've probably knocked, I tried to add it up once. I probably knocked, 12,000 doors for Democratic candidates in my life, right? Mm-hmm. And Trump is awful. I've written a piece, with the numbers on how, Trump says he's going to fix healthcare by kicking undocumented people out of the country. It's sick, right? And the reality, of course, is that actually, if you look at the numbers, they're subsidizing us. right? Undocumented immigrants get very little health care, and they pay so much in taxes that they actually subsidize our health care, right? So that part of it, that part is crazy, right? But when the response has been, we're going to let the private insurance industry get more subsidies from us, and that will sort of expand coverage. And then we have to go through this hell to try to get coverage. That's one of the reasons why people would tear the ACA apart. Now, I think getting rid of ACA subsidies is a bad idea, and Trump's going to try to do it. It should be stopped. But the reality here is that both parties own this disaster. And until we can hold them accountable, and that shifts. And as David said, that's going to take a lot of organizing because they've got all the money and the lawyers and everybody else in the world on the corporate side. I've been looking at the lobbying disclosure for United, and I mentioned all the numbers on their campaign contributions, right? It's about evenly split between parties, right? Because they manipulate the system, right? And you can see it on their disclosures. They lobbied against Medicare for all and single payer in 2020, and when it was clearly off the table, you can also see them say, oh, and we're going to make Medicare Advantage better, which means allow us to make more money out of Medicare, right? And so there has to be a recognition that to the extent that the Democratic Party is a vehicle for progressive change in this country, we've got to hold our friends accountable because they're not doing it at all, right? And and we get locked in, and then when there's this enormous public frustration that you described, everyone's upset. We got locked in then to this, well, Trump is terrible and he's going to get rid of these subsidies. So a few more people are going to get hurt, and you wind up fighting a defensive battle over a system that both parties own. And that, I think, has just been a political disaster for us. And we've got to figure out ways to get around it because the system destroys everybody. It destroys people of color and low-income neighborhoods even more than anybody else. I mean, I work for United here. I did an article. If healthcare costs in San Francisco, San Francisco hotel workers are on strike right now over healthcare. If healthcare costs in San Francisco had increased at the rate of normal inflation, all those workers would have had almost $250,000 in their pocket in extra wages.
Oh my gosh.
Right? So it's completely out of control. And we just, as David said, we have a fight on our hands.
John Canham Klein, is there anything left unsaid, at least for this conversation, because you're coming back here?
I would be delighted to.
We have a lot to talk about. No, healing and stealing. I mean, I don't know what else to tell you. I mean, go to Substack, everybody, because that's where I'm hanging out these days. I mean, and that's because that's really what it is, because it's been a bipartisan betrayal, quite frankly. See, I'm married to principle, not to party. I'm a registered Democrat. I have to be, because that's only, honestly, that's only, I can't vote. You have to, in Chicago, you have to align yourself with a party to vote.
Same in New England.
I go for one, I listen to everybody. Because if you make some sense, I'm going to work with you. I am. I'm. Look, you all get upset if you want to. Ashley King from Memphis is saying, "Speak the truth, brother." Please. So he has got his fist in the air for you right now, riding with John. And I'm not mad with you because I am too. I mean, because we have to have people who speak truth, and that's what this platform is for. Because when I look at the corporate media, I'm like, you guys. You're not hearing us. You're not feeling people. And this is cruel too, because you're mocking these people. And that's what it feels like to me. You're mocking these people. And we will not learn from this man's death. Because when this happened, the first thing I thought was that this was a hit and that healthcare was behind it. There's too much pain out here. And when you have this kind of pain, all bets are off. And that was heartbreaking, because a man, a wife, I don't care if they were separated or not, she doesn't have her husband, and sons do not have their dad.
No, it's
and
terrible.
Parents don't have a child, and loved ones and siblings. I mean, this is when you take a life, that's the most awful thing you can do. But the healthcare industry is taking a lot of lives.
Every year, thousands. Even though we spend way more money on it than anyone else. That's the thing.
We're making them rich.
It's crazy. It's really good. Well, I'll just say this, Santita. First of all, thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it. It was a delight to meet you. It was a delight to see David for the first time in a very long time. He's my co-author, and just that if the people with political power in this country, and that means both politicians and media and business people, don't recognize how awful this system is and how it is not normal and doesn't need to be this way. In the long run, we've had a lot of talk about democracy, frankly, from both parties. In the long run, it won't be sustainable, as you said. As a society, we just can't keep doing this. One piece I wrote that I was really proud of. I did a piece. One of the great successes of the ACA supposedly was requiring free preventive health care. In the 6 years after the ACA that went into full effect, the percentage of American adults who got their regular, necessary, priority preventive care declined. Because you can't move positive policy through this money-grabbing swamp. You can't do it. And for all of and I think for healthcare professionals who want to focus on the critically important issues of equity in our system, where even leaving the financing aside, we have a profound legacy of racism in our medical system, right? Fixing that now by telling 6 million employers who buy thousands of these different health plans from the insurers that they're going to have to implement these various it's not possible. We have to fix the structure so that physicians and nurses, aides, and everyone else can take care of us the way that they were trained to, and not spend their time, effort, energy, and money fighting with insurers, or frankly fighting with big hospital companies. So that's it.
No, so you can make them rich.
Exactly.
John Klein, Healing and Stealing. Go to Substack. I'm telling you. You'll laugh, you'll cry, but you'll think. And that's what we have to do. Consider this to be your home, John Canham Klein, because you know what?
I'll come back anytime, Santita. Anytime.
I'm going to have you back all the time. How about that? He's going to be like, not again. Oh, here she goes. But we're going to do this. Well,
that's great.
That's what the platform is for.
Yeah.
We have to put out our own message. And the more that we put it out, the more we push, we're going to make something happen. That's how movements are made. That's what we have to do.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you so much, love. Thank you for all the work.
Thank you. You too.
God bless you.
Bless you and bless your father too. Do my best, okay?
Bless your wife. She's doing a good job. She's trained you well, young man.
She really has.
I know she has. My father's had one for 63 years. I know these things.
Thanks, Santita. I hope we'll see you soon, okay?
Absolutely. God bless you.
Bye.
Back
You too.
for the Santita Jackson Show on AM 950 Radio, the voice of Progressive Minnesota. See you in a minute.